Alright folks, we're back here for the second half of Fear the Walking Dead from season 7. This time we're jumping into episode 9, folks. Man, we got some things to talk about. It is good to be back talking Fear the Walking Dead. This episode was called Follow Me. And in this episode, we focused on Alicia. Now, I got a couple of pretty early thoughts I want to really drop before we get into things. This was the most typical Walking Dead filler episode that we just get over and over and over. It doesn't really serve a huge purpose. It doesn't really decide to drive off of a different path, like the same recipe of this episode you've seen in previous episodes, of filler episodes, shall I say. So like this episode was kind of underwhelming, especially for it to be returning. So this is a premiere episode for the second half of the season, so I'm expecting this to come out with punches, you know, but this was a kind of lackluster episode. I'll just keep it 100. However, I am team Alicia all the way, and with Alicia being the focus, with her really, you know, not having really much of a presence the earlier part of this season, I guess I'm all for it, you know what I mean? But we're gonna talk about it because the last time we seen Alicia, she was in a dire situation, ultimately resulting in her being bit, losing her arm, and then obviously becoming very sick, dealing with this fever. So now, Alicia, we're starting off in this episode. Alicia is definitely having massive amount of fever dreams, which are very vivid, and all sorts of different things can really come for those type of things. But in her very vivid fever dream that she's having, it goes back into her following that walker that was supposed to lead her to Padre, and she keeps seeing this, so she feels like this is almost like a prophecy and whatnot. And while she's doing that, you know, she has folks following her, and that's sort of her purpose, is saying like, I'm going to leave everybody to safety here, so I'm going to follow this walker that for whatever reason is going to lead us into the right direction, which is just completely nonsense. And I feel like everybody feels much like Morgan, like, this doesn't make sense. I mean, I like you, Alicia, so I guess I'll follow it, but like, hey, I don't know about that. But with this dream that she's having with this walker, she's starting to realize that this dream is absolutely much deeper and much more important into the realization of what she needs to do going forward. So it's not just a dream that's just happening. There's actually way bigger messages in this that she's starting to kind of realize. But in this episode, while she's battling this fever, because she wakes up in a where is she? She's in a house that she doesn't know how she got there. She meets Paul. Paul's a stranger. Yeah, tell me if you heard this story before. Paul's a stranger that said, hey, I saw you passed out somewhere. Decided to bring you in to kind of help her back up to standards here, and give her protection and safety, you know? And in the meantime, Paul, he enjoys music. He has a hearing impairment. And beyond that, he's just a good guy. You know, he just likes his music the way he does. He has a whole little story about that. Like I said, he is hearing impaired. So he does have a couple of little comedic moments of this episode that kind of balances things, because it starts to feel a little bit deep. Because obviously Alicia's going through things. He's also going through some things as well too, but his banter, you know, I definitely enjoy it. But with beyond that, he's asking all the questions that we want to know. Well, if you've been bit and you haven't turned thus far, and you have a fever that you can't break, well, what is it? Everybody's trying to figure that out. And, you know, that's sort of his whole thing, is just like, hey, I saw you kind of there, and I needed to do something. So he decides to bring her in, you know, give her safety and protection, but also kind of help her back up. But it's clear that she's been bit. The arm is gone. There's no infection. Like, answers. We need answers here, you know, and that's where he's at. Along with that, as always, somebody's after Alicia, and this is where Sage and Arno from Trans Crew are looking for her. So they're doing their whole little knock knock, is she in there type of thing. And of course he protects her and whatnot, but they're pretty much tipped off that she's here, and that's where things kind of go in this episode. It's just, you know, Alicia trying to survive, trying to also, you know, discover and get back to her crew, but discover the mission and everything. And beyond that too, the other question is, well, what happened to her crew after she had got out of there? And obviously we're going to get an answer to that in this episode. But this episode was definitely way over dramatic than it needed to be at times. It was intense moments, but also I felt like those were very much heightened for whatever reason. Really wasn't needed. The escalation of things really, I don't think was nothing. I don't think that the escalation of events was really like consistent with the tone of the episode. Things were just like, we need drama, we need action, just spike it up, and things felt a little all over the place a little bit. And again, this episode followed traditional Walking Dead tropes that we've seen in the past, where we have a main character somehow get into a situation, meets a stranger, the stranger befriends them, and does whatever they can, and eventually it's the convincing factor, hey, come with me, or they're going to say, hey, I gotta stay here, this is my way, and we kind of know how this all kind of plays out. You know what I mean? It's the same old. And to be honest, this episode felt very, very much like Alicia was just the female version of Morgan, because Morgan has done this more times than enough in Fear the Walking Dead, in terms of him in some type of situation needing some aiding, and whatever it may be, and he meets a friend, and then things happen, But the biggest thing in this episode was really about the psychology of Alicia, from everything that she's been through, what she's currently going through. And she's definitely said some things that makes a lot of sense in terms of like coming to terms and to the realization of what these dreams mean. Like, Alicia's never been one to really follow her own voices, because she's always had massive voices around her, with her mother, with Nick, everybody. So the moment that she took a moment to actually listen to herself is when she's really starting to come into her true form. And that's where she's now deciding that I'm going to bet on myself, follow my dreams, and I'm going to do whatever I can to protect the folks, give them a place of shelter, and ultimately take down Strand. And you combine to that. That's why we're Team Alicia here, But she has a plan going forward, and we're going to see how this all plays out. Now, the other thing I'll say in this episode was two things I really did like. I thought the closing shot was really dope. It was a shot of some walkers. And not just some walkers, but maybe more than some, and maybe even more than that, if you catch my drift. And then there was a shot of the whole entire Fear the Walking Dead family. It served its purpose as to why. I'm not going to tell you why, but the shot of all of them I thought was really dope. I mean, that right there, if it's not already, because I don't know just yet, if that's the poster art for this season, it needs to be. It's a really dope shot of everybody lined up together that you'll see. And I was like, yeah, I'm so excited to be back talking Fear. But like I said, this episode felt a little lackluster. It wasn't a big, like, bang, we're back episode after a break. It definitely felt more like a filler episode, but I am Team Alicia, and this episode was really the focus of her psychology and everything she's been through. Still a lot of questions, more questions than answer, but ultimately we know where her plan is going forward, where her mind is going forward, and so on. And then Paul, her new buddy that she's friended. We learned a lot about this stranger, his story. It's always good to hear about others' testimonies about them being on the road, or them just what their life is like in the apocalypse. And his story was interesting. I also thought, again, the representation of having a character who has a hearing impairment issue is always good, because you kind of see how do they exist in this, and how do they stay safe, and and all these sorts of things. And he has some really cool techniques, and they definitely came in hand more times than enough. So there's that. But yes, that would do it. We do have a review for episode 10, so step over to that review right now, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in for this one, and I'll see you over there in 1 second. Big Goldberg,